Let them welcome. Today we're going to do our first ever book club with the Let Them theory. Let them.
This is like so hot right now, right? Like it's really coming up everywhere. I'm hearing people talk about it, lots of buzz. So obviously had to get our hands on it and dive in and talk about it.
I actually know I've listened to a few podcasts from Mel, and I randomly bought this book at the beginning of the year when it came out because one of my agreements I had with myself at the beginning of the year, flashback to another video we did, is that I was going to just give myself permission to within reason, but kind of freely invest in myself without much thought. And so I saw the book and I was like, yes, I will let me buy this book. I am so impressed. It has really put frameworks to a lot of the ways in which I practice therapy with people, but it's really been very impactful in my own personal.
Yeah, I agree. I think I sometimes go into things, especially when there's a ton of buzz. I'm like, all right, what's this about? Like, that's me with like any movie or show people recommend. I'm like, sure, let me check it out. But I really have been super
With
impressed.
people I love, I hated that everyone, whatever. And then literally like 10 years later, I read the book and I was like,
You're like, this is actually so amazing. Foremost, it's a super quick, easy read. Like it seems kind of hardy, but it's just like the pages are flying by and it's like really broken down in such a thoughtful way that I think it's really easy to pick up and put down and just read a little bits when you can. So don't get overwhelmed by kind of the amount of stuff in here. It's really broken down in such a manageable way to get into.
I agree. I really appreciate her vulnerability to kind of just be messy. The girl starts the book off being like, I'm 40, I'm in debt, really kind of normalizing that life isn't always pretty. And if we're committed to constant growth and curiosity and learning, then we can make some big shifts.
Exactly what you said. I think she's super vulnerable and super like I'm gonna show my all aspects of myself in here because this is important. If we're gonna, get things from here, we have to has to come from an authentic place. And I just want to acknowledge in the first, it must be like the first chapter, even the first couple of pages, she's rolling out with a banger. Okay. She's doing like the 5 4 3 2 1. She does like she was just really in this bad space and like couldn't get out of bed and just was feeling so overwhelmed and really like sorry for herself in so many ways, affecting her relationship with her husband, her kids, all these things. And just like this launch of 5 4 3 2 1, I'm getting up. 5 4 3 2 1, I'm going to go get a drink of water. Like the littlest breakdown. And that is something, often when I work with people that are dealing with depression or really having a difficulty coping with certain things, I'm like, that is such a, not necessarily calling it 5 4 3 2 1, but just like breaking it down into small, manageable little tasks throughout the day is such a, simple thing, but not simple when you're in those spaces. And I think just like turning off your brain a little and just like revving yourself up to do one small task. I loved that she just came out right off the bat with that.
Yeah, and from a behavioral activation is what it could be called as well. But it's like the pre step to that, which is this is gonna suck. I mean, I'll use my husband as an example, which you know him very well. He's also a fellow Pisces like you, so a little sensitive fish, um, paired with a Sagittarius like me, who can be hard along the edges. Which you're also married to a Sagittarius,
Love that.
but that's what stops him. A lot of times, say like for working out, for example. Whereas I've unknowingly practice over the years this like, okay, this is gonna suck, but if I'm started, like let's just go. And usually by the time you get going, then you start to unravel and pull at the threads of life that feel really good. And so I loved it. Forgot about that. I love that too. It's like the simplest thing and it's the most impactful. Oftentimes that's what comes out of therapy, which is like the simple, subtlest little like I'm help you feel seen and validated and also like just try this and you
And
have
just
access
giving
to all the things.
permission to be like, you're in the lowest of low in this moment. I'm giving you permission to count down from 5 and launch your ass up. And I
Yes.
think not only does it show up oftentimes in like clients who are dealing with depression or other kind of things like that, but also ADHD. I mean, right? That decision paralysis or kind of the the paralysis, that ADHD paralysis that happens where it's like, okay, I want, like you were saying, like, well, I want to go to the gym, but if I go to the gym, I'd first have to get up and try to figure out what I'm going to wear and find my this. And if I was going to do that, I'd have to go let the dogs out or do, and it becomes this whole paralysis. And I'm like, stop, break it down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're going to do this one thing, and you stop thinking about everything else. So I think it speaks to a lot of different things that people cope with. So yeah, not to like just obsess about the first page, but loved that.
Well, let's get into it. The let them theory. It is really kind of a two-parter, and I really appreciate her insistence on there are two parts to this theory.
Yes.
It's not a let them, it's also a let them and a let me. And so when I was reading this book, none of it, and I think she takes ownership and acknowledges, is that none of it is brand new. All of this theory or this practice really is part of what we already do. So, how would you describe, and I can also describe it, but how would you describe let them and let me?
Yeah. And to kind of speak to that, like because it's titled Let Them, I kind of just assumed like that was the whole phenomenon. And when I started reading about it, I kind of was like, ooh, there was a little hesitation because I was like, well, this feels like not a complete thing. So when that part of it came in, of the second part of Let Me, I was like, okay, like I'm totally on board with this. But so, I think what you said, like it is so important to really capture both sides, because it is not complete if you just let them. You have to let yourself. And I love that she kind of spoke about how it came about, right? Like she was two examples she used actually, just to briefly overview them. But she said something about like it was her kid's prom and like they were kind of like screwing around, like didn't have plans. It was a son, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, well, what are you going to do? What do you mean you don't have this plan? And it was this anxiousness that arose in her. And she was like, you need to have these things planned. And her other daughter, who was older, was like, Mom, like, let them. Like, who cares? Like, just let them do it. And it's so simple, right? These wise children, but it was such a simple concept. And she really spoke, though, to that discomfort. I think for, any parents out there, like, there is this discomfort when you have to, like, release control of something. And at that stage, like, her son was a senior in high school, and I'm like raising teens right now, and like there's this painful separation that's happening. Like they need to pull away and they need to make their own mistakes, but it's actually physically hard for a parent to just be like, okay, I'm not going to worry about this anymore. Like this is your shit. So I just appreciated that from a parent lens of like, yeah, like she really acknowledged like that is hard to let go of. And the other example she used was like just scrolling the socials, and she came across like a girls trip, right? And like she was like, okay, I wasn't invited on this. And that physical discomfort that comes from hurt or feeling excluded. And I just was so appreciative that she spoke to that of our nervous system, our body is protecting ourselves. And immediately that wall goes up of protectiveness of like, what the like, what did I do wrong? Why was I excluded? What did I do wrong? I have to repair relationships. There's something I'm missing because I wasn't invited. And I just like really appreciated that she spoke about those things. And so to get back in
And
my long-winded
so
answer,
vulnerable.
I'm like, to get back to it though, like, right, let them is just like giving yourself permission to be like, this isn't about me. Like, I'm going to let them do what they're going to do. This is not in my control. I don't have control. A lot of this is like really about like releasing control, right? And then on the flip side, the let me is really about like what steps can I take? What actual steps are within my control that I can take? So like the let them is like I'm not gonna call them up and be like, why wasn't I invited? Like that is the space of our brains, right? That old part of our brain that is like protection, fight or flight. What did I do? I have to protect myself here. And the let me is just like, well, like, let me reflect on what led to this or like why I'm feeling so triggered, or maybe I feel like I need to nurture my friendships more, or maybe something I want that is in my control that I can pursue. So that was kind of a frizzle frazzle answer. Like, how did you interpret that? What was your kind of process
Yeah.
there?
First off, it's so much about control, and I think she says it best on page 38. The fact is, none of that control actually makes you feel better. In fact, it has the opposite effect. Trying to control people and situation doesn't calm your fears, it amplifies them. Any psychologist will tell you the more you try to control something you can't, the more anxious and stressed you become. And so, while this theory has so much meat to it, it's also so simple.
Right.
As you were saying about control, it's about letting them take ownership of their own behaviors, thoughts, and situations. And which could be in the last example you shared, letting them on the girls' trip have so much fun and reap the benefits of the work that they've put into cultivating the relationship. And let me take ownership of my shit. Let me take ownership of reflecting what relationships I need to invest in. So to me, that's what the let them theory really is. And, she even acknowledges it's a tool that comes from Stoicism, which is, focusing on controlling your own thoughts and actions, Buddhism and radical acceptance, detachment theory, letting go. So for me, let them and is about giving yourself permission to see other people for who they are, and the let me is a chance for me to step into my values. So it's really giving me permission to take ownership, which ownership for me is a big piece in therapy where I think I watch a lot of, well, not a lot, a healthy amount of videos of people talking trash about therapists online, being like, your therapist should be doing this, this, and this. I have a lot of reactions to that. And in a way, that is safe with clients to ensure that their psychological floor is well maintained. It is about getting people to see and take ownership of their own behaviors and seeing what's in their control, because it is normal to hyper focus on what we can't control, which, as she wrote, kind of only increases our anxiety. So while it's a natural reaction to the environment, focusing on what we can control really is more soothing, though oftentimes we don't want to look at it. So anyway, I that's why she's not a therapist, Nell, the author. And so, but this I think is such a therapeutic book in that way.
Really is. Yeah. And just to add that one more piece to that, right? Like when it becomes, it's like she wrote something like when you acknowledge others' actions and choices, they're not yours to control.
Hmm.
Like a lot of our anxiety brain is like me, me, me. Anxiety is like so focused on us. So it's like when someone doesn't text us back right away, we're like, why are they mad at me? Right. Or like when we didn't get invited, it's like, what did I do wrong? Or um, any little piece like that. That is your anxiety trying to convince you. Right. And we've talked about this before. Like the anxiety brain is so sticky and she'll just bounce around in there and give you all the reasons of why this is happening to you. But you like that piece of radical acceptance is so important to just sit with it and be like, this actually isn't all about me.
Hmm.
So, yeah, there's so much overlap with anxiety and all these different things.
When she first introduced it, and I wish I would have flagged it actually. And so I'm going to summarize here. I had an interesting reaction. So, she was basically giving you permission when you say let them to someone who maybe is irking you or annoying you. And she described an emotional response of like, let them. And then that piece where you're like, I'm better. I am
Yes,
more
I'm so
calm.
evolved.
And yeah. And it's interesting. Oftentimes when I accept people's shitty behavior, I observe it a lot in airports where people are so anxious essentially and fearful and so dominant and they want to get theirs and class it. Like it's just gross in some ways, but I do have a very zen like nature when I go to the airport where I'm just like, you know what? Like I'm out of all the control. Most of the time, I'll say I have a healthy balance of where I'm just like, they're doing the best that they can. And so that's my nature and maybe I've worked at it a lot. But as soon as she introduced the whole let them, I'm better. I'm bigger than this. It's funny because started to notice that
You were
I
like, "Ooh."
actually whoopsies. I do have that some. But I'm so happy that she kind of put that in there because,
Yeah,
my natural response most of the time is, people are doing the best that they can and that's what they got and that's fine. But sometimes that does sneak up. And so, but that's part of it, right? Where we let them and then we let me. I take ownership of my stuff, which could also be my reaction to letting them. And I just really appreciate the practice of it because it really is a practice. It's a theory and a framework that you practice.
Yeah. And whether it's with the let them or the let me part, my therapy brain wants to say, but still acknowledge it. Still acknowledge the feeling. The feelings are real, right? The feeling of hurt, the feeling of anger, standing in that line, the feeling of, betrayal or being left out, isolation. Those are real feelings. And I think, you know, it's easy to be like, right? But I think that's what you're saying is like, there is a space for us to like, oh, ouch, that like actually really hurts. I'm going to like take a deep breath, let them do their thing, and now see what's in my control and let myself kind of pursue that. So that was one thing that I was like, oh, but like, it's okay to have those feelings. We don't want to brush over that.
There's, I think it's a Viktor Frankl quote, which is between stimulus and response, there's space.
Mm,
And there's more to that quote, but that part sticks out to me. And it's almost like stimulus, which is the let them, and the response, which is the let me, but the space in between, which is the space where we can honor, our younger parts, our parts that feel dysregulated that need some tending to, which is we're going back to the example Mel, the author, used in the book, which is going to the girls' trip, which is like maybe those younger parts feel hurt and
yes.
excluded. And it's like we want to definitely validate it's okay to have emotional responses. And I love
Yeah.
that you brought that up because it's giving us space to be less reactive,
Yeah.
which could also be part of the let me, which is let me not be reactive and let me assess why I'm having this emotional
Or
response.
let me feel it. Like, let me give myself the time and space to feel it. Oh,
Sure. Yeah. That.
yes. But yeah, allowing that for that, like, I love it. You said like a pause or something. Cause I'm like, we can stretch those moments out. We can stretch that out. It doesn't have to be this like, let them, let me, I'm on my way. I'm so liberated, right? Like, we can stretch those little pauses out and allow it to sink in because that I think is where the growth happens.
It's 100. I have a personal example, which I haven't actually shared with you.
Do share.
So we all know that I am ADHD and hate bosses, but I, recently was supposed to start a part-time job. I'm not going to name the place. Oh, this is also breaking news too. Gulp, gulp. But my husband and I have been waiting for adoption. The chances of that, it's a newborn adoption, and we're hopeful. We've been presented with an opportunity with, a kiddo we would like to adopt. Anyway, it lined up to where starting at this part-time gig did not it made no sense because I would like start a day and be like, okay, well, I'm taking leave. Thank you so
Actually
much.
gonna bow out for 3 months.
Thank you so much. I'm leaving. Thank you. No, but anyway, so, I've been in communication with them, being really transparent. Essentially, we're moving the start date, but I got correspondence back and it was just like really curt and accommodating. And I felt when I received the email, I immediately felt like it wasn't fair. And, I know how it came to be. This is a long way and a very loaded way example, but it's the most recent and also representative of my stress level at the present moment. I didn't respond right away, which like I had been in constant communication. And so I let them give me what they thought their best course of answer was, which is all I could ask for. And I took space and let me handle my emotional reaction before I responded. And through the help of my spouse, where I was like, I just need to talk this through. And of course, which we can do whole different content of like, he's like, let me problem solve for you. And I'm like, I'm actually better at that than you are. So like, I just need empathy at the
You're like,
moment.
actually, no.
Yeah. So I'm good on that, but I need you to hold space and like talk me through this emotionally. And so, but anyway, like taking that time to actually feel your feelings. Like my response was a response I didn't even know because I'm like, hopefully going to be a new parent. And I'm already feeling protective of the time. And I already feel like I could have just started the job and went on leave and legally been protected and got more time. But the truth is that I need to start work at some point and I need money. So like what they were offering me was great. And to to your point in that very again long-winded example is take time to let me feel my emotion. And of course I didn't even take 24 hours, but I had stopped the flow of conversation because I was having a response that I needed to tend to. So, see, this is already magic, magic, magic,
And
magic.
It's like the slowing down. It's like allow yourself and give yourself permission to not be so damn fast.
Yes.
We are like conditioned, I feel like, to just be productive. And
Mhm.
I'm like, productivity is not necessarily how much time, right? It's like a thoughtfulness and allowing yourself to think about what you're going to say. So I'm proud of you.
Well, this has been a recap of, if you're following along, we encourage you to read the book. Honestly, this is chapter 1 through 4. We don't have a plan. There's 20 chapters. I don't know if we'll have videos, but we'll unfold as things come up. And so, yeah, follow
Oh,
along.
yeah, like please share feedback. If anyone has feedback about things that stood out to them or things that like you found really helpful or had questions about or wanted to talk more about, like we'd love to incorporate those things. So please don't be shy.
Yeah, maybe from this section, let us know what let them means to you and how, even if you're not as far in the book, we both finished it, but if you're not as far, then how have you already started to exercise some of the things that you've learned or made connections? Sometimes it's good to consume everything before you put stuff in practice. So yeah, share what has come up for you so far. More to come.